If you have been following along with the latest season of Power Rangers, Dino Fury, you may have some questions about the Morphin Masters. They were introduced in the first episode as part of a backstory explanation, a huge lore dump that told us about an unheard of Ranger team from the past that had powers given to them by the Morphin Masters. So these are clearly very important and powerful characters. But just who or what are they? Let's find out. Now let's clear this up from the start. The Morphin Masters are not a new thing. They were actually mentioned all the way back in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but we haven't really heard much about them since. So, how were they featured back then? Well, all the way back to the 7th episode of Mighty Morphin, Rita was trying to unlock a chest that contained 2 power eggs. Zordon later explained to the Rangers why these eggs were so important.
It is an ancient tale that dates back to when the battle between good and evil began.
Millions of years ago, ancient sorcerers who called themselves the Morphin Masters hid a universe of power within 2 mystic power eggs. By casting the eggs into the sea, the sorcerers believed that their ancient ancestors would look down on the eggs and protect them from universal danger. So, as I am sure you will agree, this sounds pretty important, and like it would be a pretty important part of the overall Power Rangers lore. Except that it just wasn't. It was literally just a throwaway line that was used to explain something from what is generally perceived as a fairly unimportant episode. Building a larger, cohesive universe wasn't really a priority back then. While other early throwaway terms such as the Morphin Grid were of course eventually expanded upon, the Morphin Masters were pretty much just left alone. That is until Boom Studios took over comic book duties. And while the show and the comic are considered separate universes, at the end of the day it's still Power Rangers content, so it should definitely be mentioned here. Getting involved during the Shattered Grid storyline, the Morphin Masters were portrayed as beings outside of the universe, ones who sort of set the worlds in motion. They had emissaries to speak with mere mortals and weren't all that concerned with involving themselves in the affairs of man. They still had a big part to play in the comics, and we did eventually get to meet one in the Beyond the Grid storyline, Praetor. This master's true nature was still kept vague, but we did get a few more details. They assumed that they were the ones to discover the Morphin Grid, and devoted themselves to studying its unique singular nature. Since then, we've gotten a little more information, including the revelation that the Master's entire civilization ascended into the Morphin Grid. This sort of addresses those ancient ancestors that were mentioned by Zordon in their original appearance. Anyway, are these Morphin Masters the same ones that are featured in Dino Fury? Yes, it's a different universe, but are they the same thing? The design is definitely very similar. There are differences for sure, but you can see the inspiration. In the first episode of Dino Fury, Zato described them as being ageless beings with untold power. They appear out of some kind of portal and access the Morphin Grid in order to give Zato and the other Knights the Dino Fury powers. I don't see any of this as a contradiction to what Boom Studios gave us, so, in my opinion, we can probably take this info that the comics gave us as lore. Whether it's a different universe or not, they clearly have some sort of control of the Morphin Grid, and I guess they can give anybody Power Ranger powers at any given time. Can you imagine the future possibilities we have if that's the case? Especially now with Hasbro moving away from the Sentai link, there are no longer any limits to where they can go with the story. It's a very exciting time to be a Power Ranger fan. Do you guys think that the Morphin Masters will feature more prominently in Dino Fury as the show goes on? I certainly hope they do, as personally, I think it was the coolest moment of the show so far. If you guys have any theories on how they will be used, be sure to comment down below and share your ideas with me. I absolutely love reading all your fan theories and speculations. Another bit of Power Rangers related news I'd like to share with you guys, especially those of you that are based in the UK like me, is Hasbro has just launched Hasbro Pulse UK, which is fantastic news if you're a collector of the toy line such as the Lightning Collection and all the props and figures that come with that. We can now pre-order directly from Hasbro, which is such a big deal. Hopefully meaning there shouldn't be such a big delay between the US and the UK customers. Great news. Finally, before I go, I want to remind you that we do also have 2 other YouTube channels. If you're a fan of Dragon Ball, we recently launched a channel dedicated to the lore of that. It's called History of Dragon Ball, so please check that one out. And if you're a fan of The Lord of the Rings and all things Middle-earth, we run a channel called History of the Ages. That one's been running for over a year now, so there is a ton of content for you to dig into that, if it's of any of interest to you. Both channels are linked on my channel if you want to check them out. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, guys. I hope you have a great day, may the power protect you, and I'll see you next time on the 6th Ranger.